Please leave a comment where you are watching from. I was 18 when I started working at the diner near campus. It was one of those 24-hour places, wedged between a gas station and a vape shop, just off a highway exit that never slept. Students, truckers, night shift nurses, people who couldn't sleep, all kinds of folks came through. I took the job because I needed the money. Tips were decent, and it worked with my class schedule at Pine Valley College. I'd only been on the job for 3 weeks when Joe started coming in. He was older, mid-60s, maybe even 70, but he didn't look frail. He had a sturdy build, wore old denim and flannel, and walked with purpose. He always sat at the same table near the window, where he could see the parking lot. Ordered the same thing each time: coffee, 2 eggs over easy, sausage links, and sourdough toast with extra butter. He was polite, not overly friendly, but warm enough that I didn't mind serving him. He called me kid, which normally would have annoyed me, but from him it somehow felt okay. He tipped better than most of the students who came in. Every time he left, he'd say, "Be safe out there," like it was more than just a goodbye. One night, during a shift that dragged past midnight, he stayed a little longer than usual. I had just finished wiping down the counter when he looked up from his plate and said, "You remind me of my daughter." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled awkwardly and said, "That's sweet." "She passed away a few years back," he added. "Car accident." I paused. "I'm sorry." He nodded slowly and sipped his coffee. "It's all right. You just have her eyes. The way you look at people like you're trying to read them." He didn't say much else after that, just paid his bill and left. I felt weird about it, not creeped out, exactly, just off. Like he'd said something too personal, too soon. Later that week, he brought someone with him. "This is my brother, Hank," he said, as I brought over their coffees. Hank looked different. Where Joe was composed and decent, Hank had this scattered energy. His eyes darted around the room like he was casing the place, and he tapped his fingers against the table constantly. He wore a leather jacket even though it was warm outside, and there were deep purple bags under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. When I poured his coffee, he looked at me a little too closely. "You got a name?" he asked. I smiled politely. "It's on the receipt." Joe cleared his throat. "Don't be weird, Hank." I laughed it off, but something in my gut prickled. He kept staring as I walked away, and when I came back with their food, he leaned forward and whispered, "You've got a nice way about you. Real gentle hands." I remember the way his voice sounded, low and slurred, like he was trying to be seductive but didn't know how. I gave a tight smile and left quickly. Joe apologized when they left. "He's been going through stuff," he said. "He's not always like that." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But Hank started showing up without Joe. At first, it was just once or twice a week. Then it became more frequent. Always late, always alone. He'd sit at the same table by the window and ask for me by name. If someone else tried to take his order, he'd say, "Nah, I'll wait for her." I tried to avoid him when I could. Pretended to be busy. Took my breaks in the back. But he'd wait. Sometimes for hours. Just sitting there, slowly nursing a cup of coffee, staring at the door to the kitchen like he expected me to come out any second. Then he started asking personal questions. "You live around here? You got a boyfriend? What time do you usually get off?" I deflected, smiled, laughed nervously. I didn't want to escalate things, but I also didn't want to give him anything. I told my manager. He shrugged. "Is he bothering you?" I said, "He hasn't touched me or anything, but—" "Then he's just being friendly," my manager replied. "You'll get used to guys like that. It's part of the job." Part of the job. I started walking home with a box cutter in my coat pocket. Then came the night I saw him outside my dorm. It was late, around 1:30 in the morning. I had just finished a double shift and was heading back to campus. The dorms weren't far, about a 10-minute walk through a quiet residential neighborhood just outside the main strip. I usually felt safe. But that night, as I turned onto Maple Street, I saw someone standing across from the dorm entrance. He was half hidden under a tree, smoking. I didn't recognize him at first, just a shape in the dark. Then he stepped into the light and raised his hand. "Hank." I stopped walking. He didn't say anything, just smiled. That same half-lidded, too wide grin I'd seen at the diner. My heart started pounding. I turned around and walked the other way. Fast. I didn't run. I didn't want to give him a reason to chase me, but I moved like the sidewalk was on fire. I called my roommate, Jess, and told her to meet me 2 blocks over. When I saw her, I practically collapsed into her arms. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed with the lights on, refreshing the campus security page, hoping there'd be some kind of report. There wasn't. The next morning, I went to the diner and told my manager I was quitting. He asked why. I told him about Hank, about the staring, the waiting, the questions, the night outside the dorm. He rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting. He's just a lonely guy. Joe said he's harmless." I stared at him. I saw him outside my building. He shrugged. Coincidence. That was the moment I realized how easy it is for people to ignore danger when it doesn't affect them directly. I left without saying goodbye. 2 weeks later, I saw Joe downtown, outside a hardware store. I almost didn't stop, but I needed to know. He looked surprised to see me. "I quit the diner," I said. He nodded. I figured. There was a long pause before I asked, "Is Hank okay?" Joe looked tired. "No, he's not. He hasn't been okay for a long time." I waited. He sighed. "He's been in and out of prison since his 20s. Assault, harassment, trespassing. He's on meds, but he doesn't always take them. I try to keep an eye on him, but I can't be everywhere." I said nothing. Joe looked down at the sidewalk. "I'm sorry he scared you." "He didn't just scare me," I said. "He followed me. That's not normal." "I know. That was the last time I saw him. I changed my routes. Got a new job at the campus library. Told security about Hank. They said they'd flag his name if he ever showed up on campus again." I didn't sleep the night we got back. After what happened in the desert, after we saw that man raise his rifle in our direction, I just sat on the floor of my apartment in Tucson, staring at the door. My ex, Clara, was curled up on the couch, eyes wide open, not saying a word. We didn't even turn on the lights. We just sat there in silence, like we might hear footsteps coming up the stairs if we stayed still enough. I had never been that close to something so real, so raw. When you grow up watching crime shows, you start to believe that danger has rules, that it moves in patterns. But that night shattered that illusion. There are no rules out there, not in the desert, not when you stumble into someone else's territory. We didn't go back for the weed right away. It sat out there, buried barely 2 feet deep in a wash just off the main road near the border. Our last-minute stash spot. The one we didn't even mark properly because we were too panicked to think straight. 2 days went by. I didn't leave the apartment. I didn't answer texts. Clara stayed with me the whole time, even though we weren't really together anymore. It was like the fear had reset something between us, made all the stupid little fights instantly irrelevant. On the 3rd morning, she said, "We need to go get it." I didn't answer. She said it again, firmer. "We can't just leave it out there. What if someone finds it?" She had a point. There were thousands of dollars worth of weed buried out there, more than either of us could afford to lose. But I also didn't want to find myself staring down another man with a rifle. Still, I got in the car. We left just after sunset. Same car, same road. The sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting everything in that dusty, reddish glow that makes the desert feel like it's holding its breath. As we drove, every cactus looked like a silhouette. Every parked truck felt like a threat. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other near the glove compartment, where I'd stashed a knife. Not that it would have done much. Clara was quiet the whole ride. She stared out the window, her hands folded in her lap like she was trying to make herself smaller. I don't think she blinked once for the entire 45 minutes it took to get to the drop site. When we finally pulled off the road, we parked a little farther away than last time. Just in case. We didn't speak as we walked. The wind had picked up, carrying the smell of sage and dust. The kind of scent that usually felt comforting. Not that night. That night, it smelled like a warning. We found the spot after a few false starts. I remembered the shape of a jagged boulder nearby. Clara remembered a dead mesquite tree leaning at an odd angle. Eventually, we found the disturbed patch of earth. Our half-assed grave. I started digging with my hands. The soil was dry and loose, but every scrape of my fingers made me flinch, like I expected to uncover a hand, not a duffel bag. When I found the edge of the bag, I froze. Clara crouched next to me. "Is it?" I nodded. We pulled it out together. It was still there, everything we'd stashed in it. The smell was unmistakable, even through the layers of plastic. We didn't weigh it. We didn't count anything. We just zipped it up and got ready to leave. That's when I heard a click. Not loud, just soft, metallic. I turned toward the sound, heart in my throat. Nothing. The desert was empty. But I swear, for just a second, I saw a reflection. A glint of something in the distance. like sunlight bouncing off a scope. Then it was gone. "Let's go," I said louder than I meant to. We ran back to the car. Didn't talk. Didn't stop. The whole way back, I kept checking the rearview mirror. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. That someone had seen us and was deciding whether we were worth chasing. We got home without incident. But that's when the dream started. I saw his face every night, the man with the rifle. Or more specifically, his eyes. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't smile. He just looked at us like we were already dead. Like he was trying to decide whether to waste a bullet. I started locking my bedroom window. Started sleeping with a bat next to the bed. It didn't make sense. I knew we were back in the city. I knew we hadn't seen any vehicles follow us. But it didn't matter. Fear doesn't care about logic. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my friends. Clara and I stopped talking about it after a week. It was like we'd made a silent agreement that the more we spoke it aloud, the more power it had. We sold the weed in pieces. Slowly. Carefully. No big trades. No sketchy buyers. It took months. But we got through it. We never went back to that part of Arizona. Not even to drive through. It had been almost a year since the first time we found him. Or didn't find him, I guess. The man who had been living inside my great-aunt Gloria's abandoned house. The same house we'd visited as kids, back before it turned into something out of a low-budget horror movie. Before it became a place where someone could disappear behind the walls and never be found. The last time we'd gone in, things had gotten serious. We'd heard him moving. We'd seen the signs, his makeshift bedding, his notes, the box in the living room with human feces inside, topped with a daisy like it was a twisted gift. We'd tried to catch him, corner him, confront him, and we'd failed. After that night, we swore we were done. We stopped checking the house, blocked every entrance, and left it to rot. Some of us tried to forget. Others couldn't. I was one of the latter. For a while, I dreamed about him. Not his face. I never saw his face, but the idea of him. The presence. The way he moved through the house without sound. The way he made the place feel like it belonged to him, not us. The city eventually bought the property. My dad said they were planning to clean it out and sell the land. But for a while, nothing happened. The for sale sign out front got knocked over in a storm and never replaced. The grass grew waist high. Nature started reclaiming it. Then one weekend in late August, I got a call from Marcus. He said, "I think he's still there." I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. We both knew who he meant. Marcus had passed by the house on his way to his cousin's place. Said he saw movement in the upstairs window. Said the curtains shifted like someone had just looked out. But there were no curtains. We'd ripped them down the last time we were there. I didn't want to go back. I told him that. Told him we'd agreed not to mess with it anymore. That we'd gotten lucky last time. But Marcus was stubborn. He said we needed closure. That we couldn't just let it go, not with the city planning to send someone in. What if the guy hurt someone? What if he was still doing the same sick stuff, drawing pictures of us, leaving boxes of waste like messages? And so, against my better judgment, I agreed. We met up the next day, me, Marcus, Toby, and Lena. The same crew from before, minus Jane. She wanted nothing to do with it anymore. Couldn't blame her. This time, we came prepared. Flashlights, gloves, masks, walkie-talkies. Marcus even brought a crowbar in case we needed to pry anything open, or defend ourselves. The back door was still blocked, but the side window had been smashed. Fresh glass on the ground. Someone had been in. Recently. We climbed through, one by one, careful not to cut ourselves. The moment we landed inside, the smell hit us. It was worse than before. Rotten food. Mold. Sewage. Something distinctly human beneath it all. Not death, exactly. Just filth. We moved carefully, room by room. The furniture was in worse shape. Some of the stacks of boxes had collapsed. The wallpaper had peeled down in long strips like shedding skin. In the kitchen, we found a paper plate with chicken bones on it. Not old ones, fresh enough that the meat still glistened. There was a used fork stuck into an old couch cushion. A half-empty bottle of water next to it. He'd been eating here. Maybe last night. We checked the living room. Still had that same stained carpet, the same broken TV. But this time, there was a mattress on the floor. Thin. Torn in the middle, covered in a gray blanket that looked like it had been fished out of a dumpster. Next to it, a pile of drawings. Dozens of them. Most were stick figures. Some were more detailed. A few were clearly us. Lena's long braid. Marcus's hoodie. One of me, drawn in red ink, with excess over the eyes. I felt sick. Toby said, "We need to get out of here." Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. He's still here. I can feel it." We argued for a few minutes, whispering too loudly, stepping on things, making noise. Then we heard it. A bang upstairs. Not a creak. Not a rat. A bang. Like something heavy falling over. We froze. Lena whispered, "He's up there." I nodded. We moved quietly toward the stairs, flashlights off now. The banister was sticky. I didn't want to know why. Each step groaned under our weight, and I tried to memorize every sound in case I needed to repeat it to the police later. The upstairs hallway was dark. The smell was worse, like urine and mold and something chemical I couldn't place. We checked the first room, my great-aunt's old sewing room. Nothing. Second room, empty, but someone had written on the wall in black marker, "You shouldn't be here." Third room, the one with the old TV and the broken window. There was a hole in the wall. Not a small one. A full body-sized opening, just behind the closet. Fresh drywall dust on the floor. A trail of muddy footprints leading inside. Marcus crouched down and looked in. "It's a crawl space," he said. "Goes behind the walls. I think that's how he's been moving around." We debated what to do. None of us wanted to go in. But we couldn't just leave it. Then Lena said, "If we go in together, there's 4 of us. He can't take all of us." So we went in. It was tight, dark, hot. The space smelled like something had died in it. The flashlight beams bounced off the walls, catching glimpses of garbage, old food wrappers, torn clothing. At the far end, we saw another pile of blankets. A pillow. A plastic bag full of what looked like canned peaches, unopened. And then a sound. Behind us. A breath. We spun around, lights flashing wildly, and there he was. Just for a second. A face. Gaunt. Pale. Eyes wide and unblinking. Hair matted to his scalp. Lips twitching. He didn't say anything. Just stared. Then he was gone. Crawled into another hole in the wall like a rat. Vanished into the structure of the house. We didn't chase him. We ran. Out of the crawl space, down the stairs, through the window, into the daylight. We didn't stop running until we were halfway down the block. We called the police again. This time, they took it more seriously. Sent 2 officers and a building inspector. We showed them everything, the food, the drawings, the crawl space. They searched the house for hours. Found nothing. No man. No fresh footprints. No sign of forced entry or exit. It was like he'd disappeared into the walls again. They told us the house was unsafe, that it would be condemned and knocked down in the coming months. We asked them to board it up in the meantime. They said they would. We never went back, obviously. I used to work at a small family-run diner on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. I was 19 at the time, fresh out of high school, and had just moved into a studio apartment above a music shop. I was trying to save up for community college and figured a job serving pancakes and pouring bottomless coffee wasn't the worst way to earn it. It was the kind of place that attracted regulars, older couples, truckers passing through, and retirees who treated the place like a social club. I actually liked it. It gave the day a rhythm. People came in at the same time, sat in the same booths, ordered the same meals. You could set your watch by it. That's where I met Joe. Joe was one of the good ones. He came in 3 or 4 times a week, always sat at the counter, and always ordered the same thing: black coffee, a Western omelet, and a side of toast with strawberry jam. He looked to be in his late 60s, maybe older, with silver hair and a sun-worn face that made you think of fishing trips and long drives with the windows down. He was kind, genuinely kind. He always asked how I was doing, remembered things I'd told him, like when I mentioned my cat was sick, or that I'd failed my driver's test. And he listened, not just nodded. He tipped well, never flirted, never made it weird. Just a quiet, decent man who seemed to enjoy the company. After a few weeks, he started opening up more. Told me he lived a few miles up the road in a converted trailer home, and that he had a younger brother, Nathan, who had recently moved back in with him. Said Nathan had fallen on hard times and needed a place to get back on his feet. "I love my brother," he said one morning, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "But he's got a darkness in him. Always has." I didn't press, just nodded and refilled his coffee. Joe never seemed afraid of Nathan, just tired. Like he'd been carrying his brother's weight for years and didn't know how to set it down. Then one Thursday afternoon, Joe brought Nathan with him. I noticed the man before I even realized who he was. He looked like the kind of person you instinctively avoided. Tall, wiry, with a twitchy sort of energy that made your skin crawl before you could explain why. He had deep-set eyes under a heavy brow, and his hair was matted in the back like he hadn't washed it in days. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Not even close. Joe introduced us. "This is my brother, Nathan," he said to me as I poured their coffee. Nathan just stared at me for a second too long before saying, "You're prettier than Joe said." I laughed awkwardly, more out of habit than amusement, and headed back to the kitchen. I remember trying to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me. Over the next few weeks, they came in together a handful of times. Joe would talk like usual, ask about my day, crack soft jokes, but Nathan never joined in. He just watched me. Every move I made, every word I said. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard not to notice. One time, I caught him scribbling something on a napkin. When they left, I glanced down and saw a crude drawing of a woman. She looked like me. Her hair, her uniform, even the small pin I wore on my apron. I threw it away before anyone else saw. The next day, Joe came in alone. He looked worn out. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said, not even ordering food. "Nathan, he doesn't always understand boundaries." I told him it was fine, that I'd seen worse. Which was true. I'd worked customer service long enough to know how to handle weird men. But something told me Nathan wasn't just weird. He was dangerous. Then he stopped showing up with Joe. Weeks passed, and I figured maybe Joe had drawn a line. Maybe he'd asked Nathan to stay away from the diner. I didn't ask. I didn't want to pry. Then, one rainy evening, Nathan came in alone. It was close to closing time, and the place was nearly empty. Just a couple in the corner finishing dessert, and the dishwasher singing to himself in the back. Nathan sat at the counter, in Joe's usual seat. Didn't say a word at first. Just stared at me until I walked over. "Joe's not with you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "He's home," he said. "I wanted to come see you." I felt my stomach tighten. I forced a smile. "Well, can I get you something to eat?" He ordered the same meal Joe always did. Western omelet, toast, strawberry jam. It felt deliberate, like he was trying to step into Joe's place. I brought the food, then pretended to be busy wiping down menus. Anything to avoid conversation. But he kept talking. Said he'd been thinking about me. Said he liked the way I smiled. Said he'd been drawing pictures of me at night. I told him I needed to help in the back and left the counter without waiting for a response. I stayed hidden in the kitchen until I heard him leave. Didn't even wait for his plate to be cleared. When I came out, I saw he'd left a tip. $1. Underneath it was another drawing. Me again, this time with what I think was a heart drawn next to my name. I told my manager the next day. He shrugged. "If he didn't touch you, there's nothing I can do." I started taking my breaks in the back room. Stopped working the late shifts. Avoided being alone in the front if I could help it. But then 2 weeks later, it happened. We were closing up. I was the last server on the floor, and my co-worker, Danny, was mopping the kitchen. The street outside was dark. Rain drizzled against the windows. I was counting tips by the register when I saw movement outside. Someone was standing by my car. I walked closer to the window and squinted through the rain. It was Nathan. He was holding something in his hand. A long metal bar. Maybe a tire iron. Maybe something worse. He wasn't moving. Just standing there, watching the restaurant. Watching me. I panicked. Ran to the back and told Danny, who immediately grabbed her phone and called her boyfriend, Tyler. He worked security at a nearby warehouse and was only 10 minutes away. We locked the doors and turned off the main lights. Hid behind the counter. When Tyler pulled up, Nathan disappeared into the woods behind the lot. Gone. Just like that. We gave a statement to the police. I filed a report. They said they'd keep an eye out. But I never heard back. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every creak, every gust of wind, every passing car made me jump. I kept a kitchen knife on the table by my bed and a flashlight in my hand. The next day Joe came in. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him, sunken eyes, gray skin, like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice hoarse. "I didn't know he'd show up here again." I sat down across from him and asked point blank, "Who is your brother, Joe? What has he done?" Joe looked down at his hands, took a long breath. Then he told me. Nathan had been in and out of prison for most of his adult life. Assault, stalking, breaking and entering. He'd been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, but refused treatment. Joe had taken him in after their mother died, thinking he could help. Thinking maybe family would make a difference. It hadn't. "He's not well," Joe said, tears in his eyes. "And I don't know how to stop him." I quit the diner a week later. It wasn't just Nathan. It was the way no one believed me. The way the manager brushed it off. The way the police treated it like a minor disturbance. Like I was being dramatic. I moved cities that spring. Started fresh. Got a job at a bookstore where I didn't have to serve coffee or smile at strangers. I was staying with a friend in Cologne, Germany. I had flown over from New Jersey to visit her during winter break. She and I had met online through a fandom forum and became really close over the years. This was my first time going abroad alone, and I was ridiculously excited. She lived just outside the city, and we spent the first couple of days sightseeing, going to cafes, and doing all the touristy stuff. I remember thinking how different everything felt, more relaxed, more grounded. I'd grown up near New York, and Cologne felt like another world in comparison. The streets were cleaner, the buildings older, and people didn't seem to be in such a rush. On the fourth day of my trip, we decided to go to the Christmas markets. Cologne has some of the biggest ones in Germany, and they were beautiful. Lights strung across cobblestone paths, vendors selling handmade ornaments, the smell of glühwein and roasted chestnuts in the air. It felt like a fairy tale. We stayed until around 9 p.m., and then she had to head home early because of a family thing. I didn't mind. I had a full belly, a bag full of small gifts, and a little buzz from the wine. I figured I'd take the tram alone, and maybe grab a coffee before heading back to her place. I ended up wandering toward the Dom, the huge cathedral in the center of the city. It's this towering Gothic structure that looks like it belongs in a vampire movie. Even at night, it's lit up, and tourists are always hanging around taking pictures. I sat on the steps for a while, just people watching, letting the night settle around me. That's when I saw him. He was standing near the edge of the plaza, under a street lamp. Tall, maybe 6 feet 3 inches, 6 feet 4 inches. Dressed in full medieval armor. Not the shiny kind, but the dark, matte kind that almost looked like it was made from leather and chainmail. He had a sword strapped to his side, and I remember thinking it looked too real to be a prop. His helmet was off, tucked under one arm, and he had long black hair tied back, with a beard that looked like he hadn't trimmed it in weeks. He was just standing there. At first, I thought it was some kind of performance art. Cologne has a lot of street performers, and I figured he was one of them. But no one else seemed to be paying him any attention. People were walking past him like he wasn't even there. I was intrigued, so I did what any dumb tourist with a camera does. I took a picture. And that's when he looked at me. Not just glanced. Looked. Locked eyes with me from across the plaza. I froze. Something about the way he stared made my skin crawl. It wasn't aggressive, exactly, but it was intense. Focused. Like I was no longer just some girl sitting on cathedral steps. I was now someone he had marked. I looked away quickly and pretended to check my phone. When I glanced back up, he was gone. Vanished. I scanned the area, trying to see where he went, but there was no trace of him. No clanking footsteps, no fading silhouette. Just gone. I brushed it off. Told myself he probably ducked down a side street. Or maybe he was part of a LARP group and was heading to meet up with them. Cologne has a decent LARP scene, from what I'd read online. I decided it was time to head back. I walked to the nearest tram station, which was about a 5-minute walk from the cathedral. The streets had thinned out by then. Most tourists had gone to their hotels, and locals were already home. It was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. I got to the station, validated my ticket, and waited. That's when I saw him again. He was standing across the tracks on the opposite platform. Same armor, same sword, same dead stare. This time, he didn't look away. He just stood there watching me. I tried to act casual, pulled out my phone, and started scrolling through my messages. But I kept glancing up, and every time he was still staring. Not moving, just staring. The tram arrived, and I hurried on. The car was mostly empty, just me and an older woman sitting near the front. I took a seat near the middle and tried to shake off the creepy feeling. The tram pulled away, and I looked out the window as we passed the opposite platform. He was gone again. The next few stops were uneventful. I started to relax. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just some weird guy who liked to dress up and make people uncomfortable. I got off at my stop and started walking toward my friend's apartment. It was about a 10-minute walk through a residential neighborhood. Quiet, dark, but familiar. I'd walked this path before. About halfway there, I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I ignored them. People walked their dogs at night. Or maybe someone else got off at the same stop and was heading home too. But the steps weren't consistent. They'd stop when I stopped. Start again when I did. I picked up my pace. So did the footsteps. I didn't want to look back. I couldn't. I turned the corner onto her street and started running. Not a full sprint, but fast enough to make it clear I wasn't just taking a casual stroll. I reached her gate and fumbled with the keys. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them, cursed under my breath, and knelt to pick them up. That's when I heard it. The soft clink of metal, like chainmail brushing against itself. I didn't look up. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to see if he was right there, watching me struggle. I jammed the key into the lock, turned it, and threw myself inside. Slammed the door shut and locked it. Then I went straight to the window. The street was empty. Whatever, or whoever it was, he was gone. Again. I stayed up that night, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me, every light in the apartment on. I didn't tell my friend until the next morning. She kind of laughed it off, said she'd seen people like that before, guys who took the whole medieval thing way too seriously. But I knew this was different. This wasn't a guy playing dress-up. This wasn't some harmless LARPer trying to spook tourists. This was something else. Over the next few days, I didn't see him again. I kept close to my friend, avoided going out alone, and stuck to crowded areas. Then, the day before I was supposed to fly home, I checked my phone's photo gallery. The picture I'd taken of him in the plaza was gone. I know I took it. I remember the exact moment. The sound of the shutter, the way he looked at me right after. But it wasn't there. Not in the main folder, not in the trash, not in the cloud. Just gone. I asked my friend if she'd seen me take it. She said no, she'd already left by then. I asked if she thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. She didn't answer. A few weeks after I got home, I started looking online. Tried to find LARP events in Cologne around that time, or maybe street performers who dressed up in armor. Nothing came up. No forums, no Facebook groups, no Reddit threads. Just silence. I even posted on a travel subreddit asking if anyone had seen a guy dressed like that near the Dom. No responses. I still have no idea what happened that night. I don't know who he was or what he wanted. I don't know why he kept appearing and disappearing like some ghost out of a folktale. At the time of this event, I was about 15 or 16 years old. I'm 18 now, almost 19, and I still think about it. Still get chills remembering the way the night felt. The way it changed how I think about being alone outside after dark. I've always been the kind of person who enjoyed being around friends. It gave me this sense of comfort, like no matter what else was going on in my life, I wasn't really alone. And this night was supposed to be just another chill Friday. My friend Toby, who I'd known for 3 years at that point, was staying over at my place. We had this routine where we'd hang out after school, eat ramen, watch movies, and sometimes go for a run down the road late at night. This wasn't our first time doing that. We'd done it plenty before. There was nothing weird or special about this night, at first. Just for context, I've always been a tall guy. At the time, I was around 6 feet 1 inch or 6 feet 2 inches. I'm 6 feet 6 inches now. Toby was a bit shorter, maybe around 5 feet 8 inches, and he was a heavier guy. The two of us together didn't exactly scream, easy targets. And because of that, we never really felt afraid jogging down Ridge Hill Road at night. Ridge Hill Road is in the countryside, about 3.5 miles long total. Each house sits on 5 to 9 acres. My house is about half a mile in. Our plan was simple. Run to the small wooden bridge about a mile down the road, then turn around and come back. We both put in our earbuds and started jogging. I ran ahead a bit because I wanted to turn it into a little competition. I made it to the bridge first, and when Toby caught up, we turned around and started walking back. No music, just talking about nonsense. Stuff like school, video games, people we had crushes on. Dumb teenage stuff. We were about 5 or 6 houses away from mine when we noticed a car coming toward us. No big deal, right? People drive late at night all the time. I didn't think anything of it, but as the car passed us, we both turned to look at it. I don't know why, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. It was an older, dark green 4-door. Some kind of sedan. The windows were tinted just enough that you couldn't really see inside. You could tell there were people in it, driver, passenger, someone in the back, but their faces were all shadows. We kept walking. Then the brake lights lit up. I said Toby's name. He said mine. The car stopped. Then we saw the reverse lights come on. We ran. No hesitation. No discussion. We just bolted up the nearest driveway. I tried to jump the ditch that lined the property, but I tripped and slammed my knee into the ground. Hard. I got back up immediately, adrenaline drowning out the pain, and I sprinted after Toby, who had taken the actual driveway. As we rounded the side of the house, I looked back. The car had pulled into the driveway behind us. Headlights cutting through the dark. Slow. Calculated. We didn't wait to see who was getting out. We ran behind the house and ducked behind a small metal shed in the backyard. The homeowners had a few cars parked there, so we knew it wasn't them in the sedan. Whoever was in that car didn't belong. We crouched there, holding our breath. Listening. I didn't dare peek. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to know what they looked like, because something told me that if I did, I'd never forget their faces. Toby whispered, "You see that propane tank in the neighbor's yard?" I nodded. "That's where we need to go next." I didn't even have time to respond before he took off. So I followed. We bolted across the yard, climbed the fence, and ducked behind the propane tank. I remember the sharp grass cutting at my ankles, the cold metal of the tank pressing against my back, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. We waited, and waited. It felt like we were there for an hour, but it couldn't have been more than a minute or two. Then we looked back. The car was still in the neighbor's driveway. And we saw them, the three figures. All men. They were getting back into the car. Even from 12 acres away, we could see the way they moved. Casual. Calm. Like this wasn't the first time they'd done this. We didn't wait for them to change their minds. We ran. We stuck to the back property lines, keeping off the road. It was pitch dark, and we were stumbling through tall grass and uneven ground. But we didn't stop. We made it to my backyard, jumped the fence, ran to the carport and collapsed there, breathing hard. Toby was kind of grinning, like he thought it was all some wild story we'd laugh about later. But I wasn't laughing. I was pale. I couldn't stop shaking. My stomach twisted so tight I ended up puking in the grass. We went inside, locked every door, and just sat there. Didn't sleep. Didn't talk much. Every time headlights passed by through the windows, I flinched. We never told our parents. I don't know why. Maybe we were too shaken. Maybe we didn't think they'd believe us. Or maybe it was because admitting it out loud made it more real. We talked about it with each other, though, and we both agreed there's no way that was just a coincidence. That car didn't just stop and reverse because they forgot something. They were going to do something. Rob us, maybe. Or worse. I never saw that car again. Not on Ridge Hill Road, not anywhere. I'll preface this by saying that this happened a while ago, back in 2019, when I was 16 years old. Hence, I was very naive and gullible. I'm aware that it might not have been a human trafficking case, but it does seem suspicious regardless. For context, this happened in a pretty large Canadian city, let's say Winnipeg. It was late December, just a few days before Christmas. I had just finished hanging out with my friends, and was using public transit to get back home. The subway, to be specific. My friends lived in a different part of the city, so I had to travel back alone. The subway cars were mostly empty. It was already dark out. I remember it being around 8 o'clock or 9 p.m., maybe even later. I was sitting on a solo seat, the kind where another seat is positioned perpendicular in front of you. That one was empty. Then this one guy looked to be in his 20s, plopped down on that seat and greeted me with a smile. I didn't think too much of it at the time. Honestly, I thought he was cute. He had this middle-parted chestnut hair, was pretty tall, very slim, and had soft features. I don't remember his face in perfect detail, but I remember thinking he was attractive. He was wearing a sweater and jeans, didn't look disheveled or anything, just casual. When he sat down, he introduced himself right away. Said his name was Dylan. We started making small talk. He told me he had just finished university, so I asked how old he was. He said 24, and that seemed to match how he looked. Here's the part that still creeps me out. I told him straight up that I was 16, and he didn't even blink. In fact, he kind of grinned. Not a big smile or anything, but a visible grin. Then he said something like, "Ah, I miss being that young. Stay in school." I remember laughing awkwardly. Then he started asking me questions, what I was doing alone so late, where I had been, whether I had any plans for the rest of the night. And I idiotically told him no. I didn't have anything else planned. That's when he told me that he and his friends had made up this dare. The dare was that he had to bring a random girl back to their party, a complete stranger. Just walk up to someone on the subway and invite them. He said that's exactly what he was doing with me. I remember being skeptical, like this can't be real. So I told him no, I had to go home. I said no maybe 4 or 5 times. But he kept going. Kept saying things like, "It'll be fine. And if you're uncomfortable, I'll bring you right back to the station." I kept insisting, telling him my mom would get mad, asking if we could meet another time. He just said, "It's a one-time thing. I won't see these guys again after this. They're in town just for tonight." He also kept saying it wouldn't take long, that he just needed to show up with someone and say hi. I don't know what the hell was wrong with me, but eventually I gave in. I still can't believe I did that to this day. We stayed on the subway for a few more stops before getting off in this really sketchy part of the city. I didn't know it at the time, but I've since learned it's known for drugs, prostitution, and crime. Back then, I didn't know any of that, but it was obvious the second I stepped out of the station. It felt wrong. Then, randomly, the guy tells me that his name isn't Dylan. He gives me a new name, something Slavic sounding. I don't even remember it now. I'm pretty sure that name was fake too. As we're walking, he starts asking me really weird, personal questions, like, "What's your darkest secret? And what's your relationship with your parents like? And why'd you agree to come with me?" He said he liked to get to know people beyond the surface. I didn't know what to say. I told him I was a straight A student, and that school was my biggest stressor. He just looked at me and said, "Come on, there's gotta be more than that." About 15 minutes into the walk, a car slowed down next to us and rolled its window down. Some guy in the car called out, "Hey," but Dylan, or whatever his name was, immediately waved him off and told him to leave. Once the car drove off, he told me that the man was a John. I didn't know what that meant. Later I found out John is slang for a client, like a buyer in prostitution. At this point, I was starting to get nervous. But we were already almost at the house. It was just a regular townhouse. Not run down or anything. Kind of nice, actually. Inside were maybe 5 or 6 guys, all older than me. Some looked 25 or 26. A couple looked over 30. They all stared at me the second I walked in. One of the guys asked how old I was. I said 16. Another guy frowned and said, "Come on, man. That's my sister's age." They laughed it off. No one said anything else about it after that. There was an old man dozing on the couch, maybe someone's dad or uncle. He didn't say a word, just slept through everything. We all sat around the table. Someone served food, looked like chicken and rice. I didn't eat any. I felt sick to my stomach and didn't trust anything by that point. Everyone else ate. I just kind of sat there, pretending to be part of the conversation. After dinner, we went upstairs. There was a guitar and a small keyboard, and 2 of them started playing music. They asked me to record them using Dylan's phone, so I did. While they were playing, I started inching toward the door. I didn't feel right. I didn't feel safe. One of the older guys stepped in front of me, asked if I was having fun. Told me he was an accountant or something. Then he leaned in close, really close, hovering over me. I backed away and stepped into the hallway. Then I made my way down the stairs and straight out the front door. Thankfully, it wasn't locked. Dylan followed me outside and asked if I wanted to leave. I just said, "Yeah." I told him my mom had been calling me nonstop, and she was getting worried. He didn't argue. We walked back to the subway in silence. Just before I got on the train, he asked again, "Wait, you really are 16? I said yes. Then he said, "If I were your dad, I'd never let you out again." That was the dumbest thing I've ever seen a girl do. He wasn't wrong. Before I left, I asked if he had Snapchat. He said no. I asked if he had any social media. He said he didn't use his phone like that. Said he was off the grid. And that was it. I never saw him again. I know nothing happened in the conventional sense. I wasn't harassed or touched, but I can't shake the feeling that something really bad could have happened that night. That I got lucky. I was 16 the year everything started happening. I'm 21 now, and though 5 years have passed, I still think about it more often than I care to admit. It was the first time in my life that I truly understood what it meant to be afraid, not just startled or creeped out, but deeply, viscerally terrified. The kind of fear that sits in your chest like a stone and changes how you move through the world. My great-aunt Gloria had always been a little eccentric. I don't want to sound judgmental because she was family and I loved her, but she was a hoarder. One of the extreme ones. Her house in a quiet neighborhood in Springfield, Missouri had always been packed wall to wall with newspapers, knickknacks, empty boxes, and God knows what else. She lived alone for decades, and as her health declined, she could no longer take care of herself or the house. Eventually, the family made the decision to move her into a care facility. I wish I could say it was a difficult choice, but honestly, it was overdue. The house was uninhabitable. Mold, rats, collapsing furniture. the works. Nobody in the family really wanted to deal with the cleanup, so the house sat empty, slowly rotting into the ground like it had been waiting to do exactly that. Except it wasn't empty. Not for long. At first, the signs were small. My dad and I were the only ones who ever checked on the property. We'd swing by once every couple of weeks to make sure the place was still standing. No one else wanted to deal with the smell or the mess. On one of those visits, we noticed that a few drawers in the dining room had been opened. Nothing taken, just rifled through. We figured maybe someone else in the family had stopped by. A cousin maybe. One of Gloria's old friends. She had given out spare keys over the years. The next time we checked the house, some boxes had been moved. A stack of old stuffed animals that used to sit on a dusty bookshelf were now arranged in a neat line going up the stairs. Not joking, each one placed carefully on a step, like they were marching up to the second floor. That's when we started to get uneasy. We asked around. No one had been there. No one else had a key. Still, we tried to rationalize it. Maybe we'd forgotten how things were arranged. Maybe the house was just settling. Maybe a raccoon had gotten in and moved things around. Though that theory didn't really hold up when we found the fridge door wide open and its contents, what little hadn't already rotted, dumped on the floor. It was around this time that I started telling my friends about the house. I know how that sounds. It wasn't exactly smart, but we were teenagers. We thought it was cool. Creepy, sure, but in a fun way. Like an urban legend, we got to live out ourselves. So we came up with a plan. My friends, Lena, Josh, and Marcus, and I would stay overnight in the house. Just one night. We'd bring flashlights, snacks, and my 2 dogs. The idea was to see if we could catch whoever was messing around in there. It felt like a game, like we were hunting a ghost. We picked a Friday night when no one had plans. I told my dad I was sleeping at Lena's, and we parked 2 blocks away so no one would see our cars. We entered through the back door, which we kept locked behind us. I made extra sure of that. Inside, it was exactly as horrible as you'd expect. The smell hit you first, mildew, decay, and something earthy that clung to your clothes and wouldn't let go. The rooms were cluttered with old furniture, broken dishes, yellowed magazines. We set up camp in the kitchen, which was the least cluttered room, and waited. For a while, nothing happened. We ordered pizza and joked around like it was a sleepover. The dogs were restless but not barking, so I figured that was a good sign. After about an hour, we decided to take them for a short walk to burn off their energy. All of us left together, and again, I locked the door behind us. 15 minutes later, we came back, and everything changed. The first thing we noticed was a lamp. A single lamp, tucked in the far corner of the living room, was on. That lamp hadn't worked in years. The bulb was burnt out, the cord frayed. And even if it had been functional, someone would have had to climb over heaps of garbage just to reach it. That's when we knew for sure, that someone else was in the house. We all got quiet. The weight of the moment settled in our bones. We backed into the kitchen and whispered about what the hell to do next. Lena wanted to leave immediately. I kinda did too. But Josh and Marcus were more curious than scared. They thought maybe it was a squatter or a runaway. I remember Marcus whispering, "Let's just wait. See if they come down." And then Jane, another friend who had joined us but stayed quiet most of the night, decided she'd had enough. She left through the front door. We watched her go, then turned our attention back to the stairs. That was when we heard the footsteps. Deliberate. Wooden boards creaking, one after another. They were coming down. We froze. There was a wall between us and the stairs, but the sound was unmistakable. It stopped once my dog started barking, loud, deep, aggressive. Whoever was up there realized we hadn't all left. There was a door separating the staircase from the hallway. Thank God we'd locked it when we came back from the walk. I think that's the only reason they didn't get to us. We ran. Out the back door, across the lawn, and didn't stop until we were in the car. We sat there, breathless, trying to figure out what had just happened. Then we heard something. A voice. A man's voice. He was talking on the phone, softly, through a second-story window that was now cracked open. We couldn't hear what he was saying, just fragments. Been caught. And, stay low. We called the police. They came, looked through the house, found nothing. But we knew he was in there. The house had become his. And he wasn't trying to hide it anymore. After that night, things escalated. He started playing games. Leaving notes. Weird drawings, smiley faces, stick figures, flowers with knives for stems. One said "catch me" in red marker. Another had a crude sketch of what looked uncomfortably like us sitting in the kitchen. He rigged the front door with a makeshift alarm. He started destroying the furniture. One time, we found a cardboard box in the living room with feces in it, and a daisy placed gently on top, like it was a message. We started checking the house more often. Every day. Sometimes every few hours. But he was always one step ahead. We never saw him. Finally, months later, we decided to go in force, 7 of us, determined to find him. We split up, went to the main floor. Marcus and I went to the old stable area in the basement, where there was a hole that connected the storage room to the attic. We always suspected that hole was part of how he moved around without being seen. Marcus threw a rock at the hole. Something hit back. I swear to you, I saw the cardboard covering the hole bend outward, like someone was hitting it from the other side. I yelled down to Lena, who was outside. "Did you find the entrance?" She shouted back, "No, everyone's down here." Marcus and I scrambled out of that basement so fast we nearly broke our necks. We regrouped and ran for the attic. If he was still behind that hole, we'd catch him. But we found nothing. No one. He was gone again. That was the last time we went inside. After that, we gave up. Blocked the doors. Let the place rot. Eventually, the city bought the property and started renovations. They gutted the house, emptied it out, redid the walls. They never found him. We don't know where he went. Maybe he moved on to another empty house. Maybe he's still in the neighborhood, watching. I've lived a bit of a back-and-forth life for as long as I can remember. My family has homes in both McAllen, Texas and Monterrey, Mexico, so I've always moved between the two. It's not glamorous. It's just how things have always been. I went to school in Texas, but I spent most of my free time in Mexico. I guess you could say I was raised in both places. And because of that, I got used to things most people would never accept as normal. Cartel presence? Yeah, it's a thing. A constant one. I've canceled nights out because there were shootings in the plaza. I've heard gunfire from my bedroom window more than once. The military checkpoints? Routine. Friends and I would joke about it to cope, but deep down, we all knew it wasn't something to laugh about. We just got tired of being scared all the time. The thing is, until this happened, I never really had a personal run-in. I'd heard stories from friends and family, of course, but I never thought I'd be staring one of them in the eye, trying not to let the fear show. This was about a year after I graduated high school. I was 19, still figuring things out, and still kind of seeing my ex at the time, Sophia. She lived with her parents in this gated neighborhood on the northern edge of Monterrey. It was one of those places where the houses all looked like they belonged in a magazine. Stone facades, balconies, polished cars parked out front. Her parents were well off and pretty strict, so I didn't visit too often, but when I did, it was always under the radar. One night, her parents had to leave town unexpectedly. They left Sophia and her younger brother at home for the night and told them to lock the doors, not answer for anyone, the usual. Sophia invited me over, and we hung out in the living room for a while, drinking cheap tequila and watching bad horror movies. By around 2 a.m., we were both pretty tipsy, and she suggested we go outside to smoke. She had a little stash of weed. Nothing crazy, just a few grams she had picked up on our last trip to Laredo. I rolled my eyes at first because I wasn't exactly in the mood to wander around, but I agreed anyway. We slipped out the back gate and walked down the block to a small basketball court tucked behind one of the houses. It was quiet, still, and kind of eerie in that way that only gated communities can be at night. Everything was too perfect, too still. We sat on the bleachers and lit up. I remember asking her whose house we were behind, because it had a massive garage and 3 luxury cars parked in the driveway. She looked at me and said, "That's one of the cartel houses." I laughed, thinking she was messing with me, but her face was dead serious. She told me in Spanish that the neighborhood had been locked down by the military once, back in 2014, because of that family. They were known, not just in Monterrey but beyond. That wiped the smile off my face. What the hell are we doing sitting behind a cartel house at 2 a.m., smoking weed smuggled from the U.S.? I asked. She shrugged, said it wasn't a big deal. They keep to themselves. Just don't do anything stupid. But my gut was screaming. Something didn't feel right. We were sitting ducks out there, and the more I thought about it, the more paranoid I got. I kept glancing around, expecting someone to shout at us, or worse. Right then, a pickup truck pulled up in front of the court. Big, white, spotless. The kind of truck that looks like it belongs in a narco music video. It didn't park. It just idled. Lights on. Engine running. I told Sophia we needed to go. She rolled her eyes. It's probably just some teenagers making out, she said. But the truck didn't move. 5 minutes passed, and it just sat there. I stood up and said, "We're leaving. Now." As soon as we stepped off the bleachers, the truck crept forward, then sped off down the street. I exhaled, thinking that was it. But when we turned the corner, there it was again, waiting for us at the intersection. Sophia panicked and ran into a half-finished house across the street. She tried to pull me in, but I held back. Something my dad, a retired Border Patrol officer, told me once stuck with me. Never run unless you have something to hide. She had the weed. I didn't. So I stood there. The driver's window rolled down. A man inside motioned for me to come over. Every cell in my body screamed no, but I walked over anyway, trying to look calm. There were 2 men inside, both armed. The passenger had an assault rifle resting across his lap. His eyes were wide, dilated, bloodshot. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't saying anything, just watching me like a predator watches prey. The driver looked more normal. Clean cut, almost. He spoke in Spanish. "What are you doing here?" "Just walking," I replied. "What were you smoking?" "Cigarettes." He looked at his partner, then back at me. There was a pause, long enough to make me feel like the ground might open up and swallow me. "I don't know who you think we are," I said, "but we're not who you're looking for. I'm not even from here." "You're American?" I nodded. "Show me." Luckily, I had my passport in my back pocket. I always carried it when crossing back and forth. I handed it to him. He flipped through it, then asked about Sophia. "She's American too," I said. She wasn't, but I wasn't about to tell him that. He looked me over again. "Go get her." "I'd rather not. She's scared. I don't want to make things worse." He didn't argue. Just went through my phone, photos, messages, the whole thing. Then he handed it back. "I don't want to see either of you behind that house again," he said. They pulled away. I turned to the half-built house. Sophia was peeking out from behind a stack of cement bags. I waved her over, and we ran back to her block. Once we got to her front yard, I told her to give me the weed so I could toss it. She looked horrified. "I hid it under the floorboards," she whispered. "What?" "In the house. I was scared they'd search me." I couldn't believe it. So we ran back. The same half-built house. My heart was pounding the entire time. The 2 minutes it took to find the stash and get out felt like an eternity. I kept expecting that truck to come back. Kept expecting to hear footsteps. We made it out, but I've never felt that kind of fear before. Not even close. What haunts me the most isn't the guns. It's not even the danger. It's the way that other guy stared at me. The passenger. He never said a word. Just sat there, hand on the grip of his rifle, eyes fixed on me like he was waiting for a reason. I swear, he wanted me to flinch. To say the wrong thing. To give him a reason. I was lucky. I don't think Sophia ever really understood what could have happened that night. To her, it was just another crazy story. But to me, it changed everything. I stopped walking around at night. I stopped smoking, period. I started watching who I talked to, where I went. It's been years, and I still feel that guy's eyes on me sometimes. People romanticize this stuff. They think it's like in the movies. But it's not. It's real, and it's terrifying. If you live in a place where things like this happen, please be careful. Just because it hasn't happened to you yet doesn't mean it can't. And if you're lucky enough to not know what cartel life is like, count your blessings. Because trust me, it's not something you want to experience up close. I really regret the decision I made that night. It was about 11 p.m., and I was driving back from my shift at the diner. I had completely forgotten to fill up earlier in the day, and I knew if I didn't get gas then, I'd be out of luck in the morning. There's a Shell station just off Interstate 35 outside of Dayton, and that's where I ended up. It always has a few cars around, even late at night, so I figured it would be fine. When I pulled into the lot, there were a couple of cars at the pumps. That gave me a small sense of relief. Something about not being alone made me feel safer. I parked at Pump 5, grabbed a $20 bill from my center console, and walked inside to pay the clerk. The guy behind the counter barely looked at me, just nodded and keyed in the pump number after I handed him the cash. I remember the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and the odd quiet that tends to fall over these kinds of places late at night. When I came back outside, I noticed a few of the other cars had left. There was just one truck now, a beat-up red Ford parked 2 pumps behind me, engine off but someone still inside. I tried not to think too much about it. I put the nozzle in my tank and got back into my car while the gas filled. It was freezing cold. I'm talking late November Ohio wind that slices through your coat kind of cold. So I was just scrolling through my messages and trying to warm my fingers. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A man had gotten out of the truck and was walking slowly around the front of my car. His posture was weird, too casual, like he was trying to make it look like he wasn't doing anything. But the way he kept glancing at me through the windshield made my stomach twist. I glanced up just for a second and made eye contact with him. I immediately regretted it. It was like something locked in place between us, and I knew then this wasn't just some guy stretching his legs. He walked right up to my window and leaned down a little. I cracked the window just an inch, and he asked, "Hey, do you have any change for gas?" I shook my head and said, "Sorry, I don't." I didn't want to say more than that. He just smiled, too wide, and said, that's cool. No problem. Hey, you want me to take the pump out for you when it's done?" I said, "No thanks, I got it," and tried to make my voice sound kind but firm. He nodded, turned halfway around, and moseyed off behind my car. I couldn't see him anymore, and that made me even more nervous. I didn't want to look back and draw attention, but I also didn't want to just sit there like a sitting duck. I kept telling myself it was fine. He was probably just some guy down on his luck. Maybe he was nervous too, but my gut didn't agree. Every nerve in my body was tensed, and I was calculating silently. If I bolted, would he try something? Could I even get the car started fast enough? 5 minutes. That's how long I waited, watching the lot, hoping another car would pull in. But it stayed empty. Just me and him, and the quiet hum of the station lights. Finally, I spotted him again. He circled back around, walking toward his truck but not getting in. Just pacing near it like he was waiting. Then suddenly, he turned his back to me. I took my chance. I yanked open the door, popped the gas nozzle out, and threw the cap back on. As I was finishing, he noticed. I could feel his eyes again before I even looked up. He started walking toward me and said, "Hey, you're really beautiful." My heart was pounding. I gave him the smallest nod I could manage, trying not to look afraid. Then he said, "I don't look like a serial killer to you, do I?" The way he said it made my skin crawl. He was smiling, but his eyes, they were wrong. Unhinged, almost. Like he was daring me to say yes. I didn't say anything. Just turned, opened my door, and got in. As I shut it, he took a half step forward like he was going to try something. I didn't wait to see what. I started the engine and peeled out of that parking lot, tires squealing a little on the cold pavement. I didn't slow down until I was halfway home. Even then, my hands were shaking on the wheel. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those headlights following me. But I didn't. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a while, just breathing. It could have gone so differently. That's the part that stuck with me. I don't think he wanted gas money. He didn't even look like he needed it. He wasn't dressed like someone who was struggling. His truck didn't look like it had been sitting on empty. No, he was there waiting. Watching. I told my sister about it the next day, and she was furious that I'd gone out that late alone. I mean, I get it. I was stupid. But I also think we shouldn't have to live in fear just to do basic things like get gas. Still, I've changed how I do things now. I don't go out late alone anymore. I always check around before getting out of the car. And yeah, I started carrying pepper spray. Not because I want to use it, but because I never want to feel that helpless again. The truth is, it wasn't the worst thing that could have happened. But it was close enough to remind me how quickly things can turn. One wrong move, one slip, and that night could have ended in a much darker way. I still think about that guy sometimes. His eyes. That smirk. The way he asked that question like it was a joke, but it wasn't. Not really. Ladies, if you take anything from this, please just be careful. Don't ignore your gut. Don't assume someone's harmless just because they smile. And no matter how inconvenient it is, don't go get gas at night. It's not worth the risk.